We are in the year of 2023. When we look at the geopolitical change, too often we tend to focus on the West. And given the fact today, the nation of United States of America is clearly standing at the crossroads, particularly politically speaking. There are more than 10 candidates came out today, joined the GOP race, and hoping their messages could be heard by the voters. And also, for the 2024, they're going to be one of them, hopefully, to be the next president for the country. But meanwhile, given the fact today, countries in Southeast Asia continue to generate much greater noises. Not too long ago that we covered the election in Thailand, and also we had in-depth understanding why the election in Thailand was so crucial. But today, here's a question we need to ask. After the election, we still don't have a legitimate government. What gives? What are the major political reasons for this country to elect a prime minister successfully? Hey everyone, this is Will, and welcome to this brand new and exciting episode of The Missing Piece. In this episode, we are going to talk about the country of Thailand, particularly related to the political instability and also for this economic uncertainty. Given the fact today, Thailand is a critical player in Southeast Asia, and also Thailand built solid relationship with countries, for example, in Europe, and also with closer neighbor, which is China. But at this moment, without a legitimate government, how should we understand the direction for the country? And what about the younger generations? Are they going to buy into the statement put out by the monarchy regarding the empty seat? Well, here's a conversation. Well, ladies and gentlemen, in order to understand all the questions and find better answers, please allow me to introduce our distinguished speaker, which is Professor Pavin Chachavalpongpun. Again, Professor Pavin is an associate professor at the Kyoto University's Center for Southeast Asian Studies. He's the editor of the forthcoming book, which is entitled Rama X, the Thai Monarchy under King Vajiralongkorn. Again, Professor Pavin, and welcome to The Missing Piece.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Professor Pavin, I want to get started. Again, as we mentioned before, initially when I discovered you, because this amazing article that you wrote, which is entitled Everybody Won in Thailand's Election Except the Voters. I want to get started with the first question. How did the recent election in Thailand spur a cycle of recurring political instability and also frustrated the democratic system today, especially for the younger generations? How important it is for the younger generations in Thailand to participate and also have their voices heard at this moment? What do you say to that?
Well, to understand the recent election, we have to go back a little bit, in the past. I would say that Thailand in the past decade has been dominated by basically the military. So, to cut long story short, we had a military coup in 2014. After that, the military sort of set up its own government. Even though we had an election in 2019, again, people who were backed by the military came back to form the government. So that's why I said in the past decade, Thailand basically was not really democratic. And during this decade, the people who were in power put in place a kind of infrastructure to ensure that their power position would be, entrenched. So in other words, they want to make sure that any challenge that might arise from the electoral politics will not be able to sort of to kick them out politics. And that really demonstrate, during the last election, in a sense that they put in place a Senate of 250. So the infrastructure sort of, inform us that in order for any party to form government and to have its leader be accepted as prime minister, you have to win more than half of the combined upper house and lower house. Now, lower house in Thailand consists of 500 seats, basically House of Representatives. Then the upper house, basically Senate, 250. So you are talking about 750. The prime minister have to get approval more than 300 and let's say, because I'm not good at math. So 750, it had to be 375 votes. But obviously, the winner of this election is just basically from the pro-democracy camp, which will not be allowed to set up the government. That when the Senate, use its influence to block both the party and also the candidate for the prime minister, which comes from this pro-reform move forward party. Okay. So the next mini question for you, how important for for the younger generation to voice, their their desire and at the same time their frustration. We have to understand also that the majority of the supporters of this move forward party basically are in the younger generation group. So in other words, these are either first time or second time voters. They're very enthusiastic about, participating in politics, but look at the result, they went out there, they cast their vote, but at the end, it's not what is more important is basically power rearrangement among the conservative leader in Thailand.
Professor, I want to move on our conversation. Again, going back to the article, we know recently after the election, especially you mentioned regarding the younger generations, they're very excited about this, what we called move forward party. But meanwhile, within your article, at this, before the name move forward party, you put an astounding adjective. It's called a progressive. I mean, today, when we look at the political change and also look at this political instability, it's rather, I would say, sensitive to use the word progressive because that could be interpreted in many ways. So again, Professor Pavin, from your perspective, what is the reason why today we coined the Move Forward Party with the word progressive? What are some of the major changes proposed by the party leader at this moment, despite that we still don't know the legitimacy of the government yet? Go ahead.
Sure. Going back to what I said also earlier, that Thailand has been dominated by the military conservative forces. Obviously, they do not, approve anything progressive because this is something very different or opposite of what they are, which is, conservative, right? But this move forward party is, I think, the only party that has been willing to put forward progressive policy. When we talk about progressive policy, what does it mean? It means, to try to take the military out of politics. That is very progressive because none of any other political party has ever done it before, has ever proposed something like this. The other thing also, which is very progressive, is basically the proposal to reform Article 112. Article 112 is very important for Thailand because it has been used as the political weapons, to undermine, anyone thinking differently from the conservative leaders. Article 112 is basically less majesty law. Less majesty law is to protect the power or the prerogative of the monarchy. When you talk about monarchy in Thailand, that is very sensitive. And no matter how you talk about the monarchy, you could put yourself in jail just because you talk about the monarchy. So that's why when this party want to tackle this issue, very sensitive issue, you can call it progressive, right? So that's why the elite try every single possible way to block the move forward party, from going ahead with this so-called progressive policy. But at the same time, younger generation, they want something new. They see what's going on, outside Thailand, in the region, and at the international level that elsewhere democracy seem to blossom, and they just want Thailand, to have that kind of democracy as well. So that's why they support progressive policy of the Move Forward Party.
Of course, Professor, again, really appreciate the insights. It's crystal clear that anyone who challenges the monarchy, again, is going to face more major hurdles. Again, we're looking at this political arena. Now, let's move on to the question. Again, Professor Pavin, you mentioned the role of military in Thailand. Within the article, and I quote, after its latest coup in 2014, the military moved to preserve conservative dominance and contracept the future challenges with new changes, including stuffing the Senate with appointees to offset the democratically elected House of Representatives. Again, for most of us that we aren't really familiar with the role of military in Thailand, Professor Pavin, help us with better understanding. At this moment, how should we understand the role of military in this country? Again, what is the correlation or what is the relationship even between military and the monarchy at this moment? Go ahead.
Well, I mean, the two institutions, the military and the monarchy, they're almost, inseparable. So for a long, long time, they have formed a kind of working relationship, interdependent relationship, that the existence of the monarchy is because of the support from the military. Likewise, the fact that the military can play certain political role, that also because of the monarchy as well. So I mean, it's just they have long history together, which I do not want to say too much, otherwise it would eat up a lot of time. But just enough to say that the two institutions become, how to say, as I said, inseparable since the Cold War. And when the monarchy has been perceived as the highest institution and has been made equal to national security, that when you can see the role of the military. The military can always refer to the monarchy as a kind of national security. Should there be any threat to the monarchy, then it would be a threat to national security, and that would be the responsibility of the military. So that's why when people talk about reforming Article 112, immediately the military interpreted it as a threat to national security, and by saying so, it gives itself a political role. So that's very easy to understand why the military has become so much involved in politics, exactly because of the existence of the monarchy. Now, when you quote me in that article, after 2014, they set up this new Senate, right? All members are appointed by the military, because back then the military was in power, right? After the coup, we're talking about military government. Now, just give you a brief history so that the listener would understand. Thailand has had Senate before, right? But according to its 1997 constitution, it stated clearly that member of the Senate, or basically senators, had to be elected. Right. And that because, the responsibility of the Senate is basically to check and balance against the House of Representatives, which is okay. I think it's okay. It's acceptable, in many, many, many democratic countries. But then the military sort of backtracking it. After 2014, when they rewrote Constitution, they also set up this Senate. But instead of elected member, it become appointed member. When it become appointed, it become an instrument of the military. And again, it's demonstrated, in a few weeks ago, when they try to approve, the name of Pitha as prime minister, then most of the senator objected. That's exactly a political decision.
Professor Pavin, you sort of touch on my next question. Again, we've seen the election took place a while ago, but again, at this moment, it's still rather incomprehensive to understand that we still don't have a legitimate government at this moment. So in other words, there's still a formal leader, again, to fulfill this empty seat. And also, going back to your article, which is entitled, Everyone Won in Thailand's Election Except the Voters. I really want you to help us with the title. Voters' voices matter in every single election. I mean, that's the whole the democratic system is about. But meanwhile, your article says that everyone won in Thailand's election except the voters. What is the indication behind that? Does that mean that voters' participation was not counted as the effort towards the political system today in Thailand? What is the message behind that?
Well, I mean, the title, basically, the title of that article capture, the essence of the article. Just basically, I mean, it looked like election become a kind of, veneer on something really something really truly about Thai politics. What that means, something really truly about Thai politics. Basically, Thai politics is still controlled by the conservative elites. Yeah, but I think they have been. I mean, also this is a message in my article that they might be conservative, they might be autocratic, but they have become much more sophisticated in dealing with electoral politics. Electoral politics, they're not interested in electoral politics for a long time because they know that they can't control the result. And the previous election sort of show them that exactly they cannot control because the winning party basically come from progressive faction, right? So and in the past, when they thought that they could not control the result, they rely on shortcut, military coup. Yeah, but every time when there's a military coup in Thailand is condemned so much, and including sanctioned by its partner, for example, the United States. So, and there's a lot of damage to the conservative forces. So that's why they become sophisticated by manipulating the parliamentary process. So in other words, they allow election to take place. Okay, go ahead, an election. Well, even if the result, might not favor them, don't worry. We can use the hand of the Senate, right, to block anyone they don't like it. So that's why, and it's very difficult to condemn them, by the international community because these basically happen within the parliamentary framework. So that's why when I said they are very sophisticated, this is how they deal with it. So in other words, you can say that the election is just basically it's just something that make Thailand look good. It's just something that make Thailand look like Thailand is a democratic country, but in essence, it's not. And at the same time, the voter who went out there, and cast their vote, at the end of the day, these votes are not important. What more important is how they arrange political power up there.
Professor Pavin, I got two more questions before letting you go. Now, let's talk about what we call generational change. And also, this is something that you also mentioned and also you wrote in the article. I guess there's no denying that youth today around the world very actively voice their oppositions and their opinions towards political change and also social agenda. And again, we'll look at the nations among Southeast Asia. But meanwhile, again, going back to Thailand, your article mentions the word generational change. A very simple question, Professor Pavin. What are the generational change that people in Thailand, particularly the youth, are looking for at this moment? And also, youth, they tend to hold different perspectives when they look at the change and when they look at how the nation is heading towards the next phase. What is your explanation for that?
Yeah, well, when I mentioned generational shift, it's basically right now, I think Thai politics, is driven by this young generation against the conservative forces. This young generation, they grew up during which time when I would say one of the main factor that allowed them to think differently is basically the emergence of social media. Everyone in Thailand have access to social media, and for the first time, when compared with the previous generation, when you do not know how to interact with the outside world, you thought that you know everything, but whatever you know is basically only within Thailand, right? All the information, offered to you basically coming from the state. So that's why I think it was very difficult for the previous generation to go up again, to rise up against, the dominance of power of the elites. Whereas the younger generation have, better access to information elsewhere. They know what's going on in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, they have seen, Arab Springs. And they just because of this, greater access, to what's going on outside the Thai border. So it allowed them to change, and I think this is very important to change the perception, the idea of political legitimacy, of political power, of transparency and accountabilities. So this day, the young kids, unlike their parents, when they said, "Oh my God, this government corrupt," okay, but we can't do anything else, blah blah blah. But the younger generation said, "No, we can do something. We can learn from neighboring country. We can learn from the West." So I think this sort of represent the younger generation, and also it reflected on the protest in Thailand in 2020. And I have to say that protest by the youth in 2020 is a turning point in Thailand, because that was the first time protest that talk about so openly the reform of the monarchy. So we already talked about the sensitivity of the issue of the monarchy, right? But despite the fact that this issue is very sensitive, but the younger generation, they were willing to confront or to challenge this sensitive issue, despite the risk. So that really reflect the change in the mind of the generation.
Of course, Professor, it's important that we understand the younger generation, again, as you mentioned before, is their thinkings and the way to form the ideas by exposing themselves to the outside world. Again, there's no denying that social media today absolutely influencing the way that how younger generations are crafting their ideas and also connecting with the world one after another. Now, Professor, I want to wrap up our conversation by asking you the last question. We're looking at what's happening today in Thailand, but meanwhile, again, there's no doubt that Thailand has direct relationship with other countries in Southeast Asia. As we mentioned before, we'll look at Cambodia, we'll look at Vietnam, we'll look at the Philippines and Laos, etc. So, Professor, from your perspective, again, you're the expert. How do you think that what's happening today in Thailand could have or maybe directly influence the relationship between Thailand with other partners in Southeast Asia? Because again, given the fact that today Cambodia recently had an election, and also we'll look at the, correct me wrong, Philippines, and again, is standing at the political crossroads as well. So how do you think what's happening in Thailand could actually influence the relationship economically or politically speaking with other countries? Your thoughts?
Well, what I can say is that and this might not be, and this might be very pessimistic rather than optimistic. I do not want to go into detail of what kind of relationship, political economic relationship between Thailand and those neighboring countries, because we talked about 10 or 11 countries here. But just allow me to say this, that the election in Thailand and the blocking of the popular vote doesn't look good on Thailand. And not only it doesn't look good on Thailand, it also, caused a negative impact on democratization process in the region, right? You mentioned yourself mentioned that, what happened in Cambodia. Cambodia has been so much condemned by in the recent election, in terms of the kind of dynastic politics, right? The domination of one family, and the electoral frauds, this and that. We also have to look at Myanmar as well. The military took over in a military coup, right, in 2021. Even though they released Aung San Suu Kyi, but there's no sign of democracy. So what happened in Thailand would only encourage autocratic leaders in the region, that it is okay to be autocratic because we're not alone. So that's why, I look at this as a kind of very pessimistic tendency, in the region, that instead of nation in this region work with one another to promote democracy, on the contrary, they work together to promote authoritarianism. Former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra, visited Cambodia 2 days ago. So I don't think this was a good signal, of Thailand wanting to go ahead with democracy. In other words, we are going back and then, sort of working with other authoritarian regime in the region. So I would end by saying that this has been a trend for illiberalism within the region, and it's a very worrying trend to be honest. Yeah.
It is, Professor. It's rather worrisome for a lot of countries today at this moment. Again, Thailand, does not just have this sole relationship with other countries in Southeast Asia, but also for the U.S. and also for the European countries. They also pay close attention to what's happening in Thailand today. Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to speak to Professor Pavin Chachavalpongpun. Again, Professor Pavin is Associate Professor at the Kyoto's University Center for Southeast Asian Studies, and he's the editor of the forthcoming book, which is entitled Rama X, The Thai Monarchy Under King Vajiralongkorn. Again, Professor, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. We'd love to have you back on the show as we continue to pay attention to what's happening in Thailand today and also for the future of the country. So thank you so much for doing this.